A little bit of granulation can make a huge difference to a painting. Let's give it a try. I'd like to thank the Process Art Discovery audience for joining me today. I'm Lynda Norman, and today we're taking a little look at granulation. So granulating mediums, pigments can really add some interest and intrigue, I think intrigue, to your paintings. I love the depth and the different levels of how the pigments show up. And very often granulating pigments that are marketed that way have several pigments in the tube of paint, and as you add different levels of water, take some away, you'll see different colors come through, and I just find that so exciting. It's the mystery, I think, of it that really appeals to me, and I thought today we would just have a little bit of fun with testing out some of the colors that typically say they are granulating. And if you're using an artist grade paint, watercolor tubes, you can generally go on their websites and they will tell you if they're granulating, if they're light fast, how staining they are, all different kinds of information. So by all means, use that to your advantage. It's a great resource to know sometimes a little bit about your paints. Typically, I just paint for the joy of it, but sometimes it's nice to know a little bit more about what those paints can do for you. And so I thought today, I just want to show you, I got this it's called Artist Grade Baohong watercolor paper. This one I got from Amazon. It says grain fine, but it is a little bit of a rough surface. It's cold pressed, it's 100% cotton, and the Baohong is really becoming one of my favorite papers to use. I first discovered it through Michael Soloviev in his Watercolor Online, and I did take a couple of days workshop with him when he was here in the Okanagan a few years ago, and discovered the Baohong paper then. And he told us then that it's a company that really works with artists to develop products that are really really workable, and things that we can work with at a different level, I think. So this is really exciting for me to work with this. I do have several paints, as I mentioned. I use Daniel Smith pretty much exclusively, and a lot of their colors are granulating, and I think that's probably one of the reasons I was drawn to them in the first place, is that that richness. And the granulation happens when different pigments are included in a color blend, and as you add water, the pigments are all different weights, of course, because they're different materials. Daniel Smith typically uses semi-precious gems and stones and ground up to make their colors more vivid and more brilliant. And as you add the water, those other colors, the colors that are in that tube, will start to evolve and come through. Rockwell Canada, Rockwell International now I think they're called, does the same thing. They have something called Self-Evolving, a line of paints that do some pretty magical things on the page. So I thought today we would try that. What I did was I sort of went to sleep last night thinking about, I wanted to expand my knowledge of painting rocks, and I thought, well, what better way of doing that than using granulating pigments and working with that. So I drew just a pile of rocks. I was inspired by, when I had my grandkids out at the local creek bank in the summer, and they were building rock piles, and they looked so amazing. So I think what I want to do is just take this little guy out. Some of these paints I don't have in my regular palette, so that they're not set out yet. But this one is called Sodalite Genuine, and again, it's another one of Daniel Smith paints that I'm just going to get rid of that little bit. That is made with minerals, and it's just it's going to be gray blue. Sodalite is kind of a dark mix of I want to say black, and I think it's got Mars black in it. I don't use black. I don't have any black paints, and I don't know what kind of pigments would actually comprise to make black. I never use black. If I'm painting darks, I mix colors very often, just what I'm using on my page. So for me, quite often that's Mayan Dark Blue and a little bit of Undersea Green, maybe some Payne's Gray, and then that just becomes a dark, and that's all I'm concerned about. So let me see here. I'll worry about painting a background later, I think. I don't know if you can see, I drew it on fairly light, but let's start at the top, and I'm just going to do one little rock at a time. And I can sit back and kind of see where I'm putting the water, I hope. And I've got a fair bit here, and it is 100% cotton paper, so a bit of it will certainly sink in. And I think I want to use the pigment fairly thick. About, I would say, the consistency of heavy cream. And I'm not a math genius, but I'm guessing about 50% pigment and water. So I want it quite thick. I'm just mixing it here. This little Levinson brush is going to wick up and load beautifully. So as soon as I've got that consistency wet enough there. And I think with painting the rock, I do want to have darker colors underneath. So I'm going to start down here and just let this paint and pigment move up through that water that's in that rock. Now I don't want to dab it with my paper towel now, but I do want to take maybe just a little bit of that moisture out of there. So I'm just going to touch it with a thirsty brush. So a thirsty brush is a brush that you've basically squeezed the moisture out of, and if you just touch it to your surface, your brush should pick up that wetness. Now this is granulating quite nicely. I don't yet see other colors coming through, but I do like how it's kind of given that bit of organic nature to that rock shape. Just one dab into that wet, and I'm just going to touch in this corner just to add a bit more of the dark. Because it's on the underside of this rock. And I do like how that texture is moving out. It's darker and lighter in some places, and as it dries, it will continue to granulate, and the pigments will settle at different levels. I don't know if you can see very clearly yet, but right in this area here, it's almost speckly, which is a really cool look for a rock. So I like that. I think the next color I'm going to try, this one is called Tundra Violet, and it's a Schmincke brand, very high quality paints. They do a lot of granulating pigments. They come in sets. I do actually have a set. Mine I think is called the Desert set. There's a glacier and a forest, I think, and all different kinds. Beautifully crafted paints. And again, we're not going to need a lot of it, so I'm not putting a whole lot on my little palette. I don't even know if you can see this. It might be too shiny. I'm not sure. I'll set it over here out of the way. Now when I'm doing this next rock, I'm going to keep the water, for now, away from the wet part of that little Sodalite Genuine rock there. And I'm just filling in that little rock shape. I have no idea if this shape of rock would actually stand the way it is on top of the other ones, but what the heck, hey? Okay. I think that's, you have to sort of sit back, take a look, see what the level of wetness is on your paper. If you were painting a larger area, you might want to let it puddle a bit more, but I don't think that's what we need to do here today. I think we want to have it a little more contained. So let's see how this is. It's a nice, thick, rich pigment. And I just want to just add a drop of water, drop of moisture. There we go. I don't know if you can can see that. It's nice thick consistency. And again, I think I want the darker color on the bottom of my rock. So I'm just going to lay that in there for now. Now this is called Tundra Violet, and I can see the purple coming through. I'm going to move that up to the Sodalite Genuine in a moment, but I just want to spread this just a bit more, I think, just to see where this is going to end up. So if I fill that whole thing in, that whole rock shape there, and then I will touch it just up to the edge of that Sodalite. You know, I can always go back in later once things have dried and fill in any little white spots that might be showing up between the rocks. But for now, I'm going to do that. And I think I want to just switch to a brush with a bit of a fatter belly. And this little brush is Imitation Squirrel. I got this from Lightwish when they sent me some paints and asked me to review them a while back. You can find that on one of our previous videos. So I'm just going to wet the brush, get it nice and damp, and then I'm going to squeeze out the excess. I want to go in with a thirsty brush, not a dry brush. I don't want to scrape things away. But I think I want to just take a look at the light source. I think was coming here because of my top rock has that little light space on the top. So I just want to pull away a little bit of this color here. And you can see as I do that, the pigments that have settled into the paper now are actually kind of a violet. Violet, lavender, I don't know, it's really quite beautiful. And so I can pull away and add just a little highlight spot there maybe. Eh? That is really quite gorgeous. We'll go back in after as well and see how they lift once they're dry. That'll be an interesting thing to look at. I just think that we're just going to pull just a tiny bit of that up for shadow. Beautiful. I might want to add a bit more dark underneath there at some point. We can always go back and do that too. So, Sodalite Genuine, I love that. Then we've got the Tundra Violet by Schmincke. Sodalite Genuine is a Primatech from Daniel Smith. Let's see what we've got. Rockwell International, and this color is called Valentine Purple. And I demoed this before, and I found it to be quite luscious. It's put it in there. It's very thick. It looks lavendery. It's quite thick, this pigment, and it might be one that surprises us. We might want to add it to maybe another color even at some point because of that lightness, but we'll take a look. And I'm just going to add some water and give it a little mix around. It is very thick, so that little clump of paint is taking some time to break down with the water, but we'll just keep at it there. It looks light now. We'll see what it looks like once we get it into our rock. Oh, and then I forgot to wet the rock. Okay, let's go back. Use our little round belly brush here and see what we can do with it. This is a lovely little brush. It's Imitation Squirrel. But I love that it's got such a beautiful, delicate little point on it, and a full body belly, so that it does hold quite a bit of water. So that's exciting. This is kind of a funny shaped rock. All right, so we're going to go in with our Valentine Purple. And it's a lovely color. It wants to move quite happily through that moisture on the surface. You can see how it is moving and granulating. This will be one that I think I want to lift out a little bit as well. And I think just because of the lightness of that, I'm going to go back in with the Sodalite Genuine, and I'm just going to add that to the underside of this one, just for those shadows. A little bit of shadow underneath where this rock is sitting on top. Yeah, so the Valentine Purple, I think, is probably something I would use more for highlights. And but again, it really depends on what you're painting. If you're doing a whole field of lavender, it could be really quite lovely and effective. And we'll just add the Sodalite in there and see where that ends up. So if I go back now, and these are fairly dry. I love that the Sodalite Genuine has given us this little speckly area here. So rocks are very speckly, or can be. And then the Tundra Violet has dried quite soft and subtle. I think I'm going to try lifting with my little bright brush. So again, wet the brush, dab it off so it's not dripping. You don't want to add more water. And I'm just going to see if it lifts. And it does. Lifts quite nicely. So when you're lifting, you can actually add to the contour of your shapes, of your rocks. Yeah, I think with the Valentine Purple, it did not granulate quite the way I thought it was going to. And so I've added the Sodalite. So I'm going to go in now with a product called Granulation Medium. This is by Winsor Newton. And it's, apparently there are other ones on the market. It's the only one that I have ever used. So we'll go with that. I hesitate to just dip my brush in, so I just want to make sure that I've got actually, you know what I'm going to do? I am going to use, oh, that's a dirty one. That's something I used for art. I'm going to use a little pipette. There. So you can pull that up and add it if you want to there. But I think I don't have to add now that I've got the pipette here. But what I'm going to do is just add some to the surface of that wet paint and watch what happens as it pushes the pigments around. So there's a fair bit of that. It's kind of pooling and puddling on the surface. You can see maybe where it's moving some of that paint around. Just going to put the lid back on because because it's safer to do that. I'm going in with the Sodalite in that granulating medium just to add a bit more of the color. And let's see what it does. You can see it's moving it around. It's giving the speckly look, which is pretty neat. And we'll add a bit more dark under here for shadow. And I'm hesitant to wash this. I'm going to use this, the middle one, for rinsing out the granulation medium. And I love what that's doing on the page at the moment. So now that I know that that is on the surface, I'm just going to go back in with a little bit more of the violet, or the Valentine Purple. And I'm just going to give a couple of drops of that in here. And then leave that to the whims of the granulation medium. We'll see what happens with that. All right. Another color that I thought I'd like to try is one that I purchased quite a while ago. I kind of fell in love with it when I watched a demo. I forget even who was demoing it. But it's called Raw Umber Violet. And then I just haven't really used much of it. And I thought it was time maybe that I did that. So it's Raw Umber Violet. So of course raw umber with some violet pigment in it. So we'll see where this ends up. It's a Daniel Smith color. And it says it's granulating. So let's have a look. Oh, now I'm getting, I've touched that rock up above, so a bit of that is coming through, which is fine. I mean, rocks are amazing. You know, I love rocks as much as I love my trees. And as a child, we spent a lot of time in the forests and the lakes around the Okanagan Valley where I was born and raised, as were my parents, which is kind of an unusual thing. But my dad and mom loved to be out in nature. But there was always an issue when it came time to come home from one of our outings, because I inevitably needed to sneak in about 10 pounds or more of rocks into the back seat of our vehicle. And sometimes that was an issue, especially once we got them home. We didn't know where to put them after a while because there were so many. All right, so Raw Umber Violet. Touch of water. Often I use the water that's sort of splashed up on the sides of my water containers, or even sometimes you can see where I've dropped driplets of water on my surface. Sometimes that's all I want on my brush. And again, that's through trial and error, and as you go, you'll learn how much water your pigments will tolerate or will need to create something, how much water your brushes will hold and what they will need to do what they need to do. So often you don't need a lot. And I like to start with less. It's easier to add more than it is to take it away sometimes. So let's do this Raw Umber Violet. Oh, look at that. You can see the violet is more, to my mind, more of a burgundy, I guess, because of the raw umber making that color happen, right? And let's just take a bit more and move that across into this rock shape. I'm going to touch the top where that granulating fluid was, that granulation medium, and see if that doesn't sort of bleed down into this rock shape. We'll see what happens. This might be one where what you take away often will show you an interesting color underneath. But that's quite beautiful with the umber. I love here where this little bit of color has sort of bled down from the granulating fluid and the Sodalite and the Valentine Purple from up above. So it's adding to the shadow effect that's created from the rock on top, right? I'm going to just grab another dry paper towel. We go through a fair bit of these. I did see something, and I'm going to try it. It's called a Swedish dishcloth, and you can reuse them, and they're very absorbent. So I'm going to give those a try. Maybe we'll do maybe we'll have those on the table next time we do a video. So I love that this is granulating. The light is kind of shifted here now from that side to this side, so maybe I want to change that a bit. And let's see what happens if we just pull a tiny bit away. And it's leaving, I don't see so much of the violet. I think the violet and the umber have kind of blended together in this one, but that's okay. It's, I just want to bring a little bit of that from the top rock into this and see what, see if we can get it looking a little bit organic. Yeah, I kind of like how that bit of shadowing is happening. So far, so good. I love how all of these are granulating. Have we tried them all? 1, 2, 3, 4. Yes, we have. So the other thing I wanted to check out is there are some paints that are quite opaque. They're almost like a gouache. And I just, actually maybe it's in here. Buff titanium is one of my favorites to use, and it really adds a lovely, delicate, fleshy tone. I use them when I paint little mushrooms and for the undersides and that kind of thing. And so, oh, and then I've opened the wrong palette. I do have some in a palette, in my Eco palette from Michael Soloviev's Watercolor Online. There it is right there. So I'm going to give that a little wet. I don't know if you can see that, but that's what it looks like in the palette. I'll give that a moment to wake up while I wet the surface of this one. Actually, I think it might look kind of pretty if I can get the raw Umber Violet to maybe bleed down into that at some point. So I'm not going to go quite up to the raw Umber Violet yet. I want to get the buff titanium onto the page before we work on getting any bleeding bits happening. Oh, there's a little fuzzball there. So this paper is really quite lovely. It's absorbing and soaking up the water nicely without getting kind of too buckly or pilling. One of my friends was painting something the other day on some watercolor that was 20% cotton, which is something I hadn't really heard a lot of, but she found it to be, it was pilling up quite quickly. She was using some gouache, and so she's going to try it on some of this paper. I gave her a couple sheets. We'll see how that works out. All right, so a fairly wet surface. You want enough moisture on the surface of your painting to get those granulating pigments to just kind of move around and settle in and find their place. I'm also painting on a fairly rough surface. It says fine grain, but it's not. You can feel the surface. It's not a smooth surface as in a hot press. If you're painting on hot press with a granulating paint or using granulating medium, you'll get a lot more movement. Painting on a rougher surface, you've got those little indentations and those little mounds where the surface of the paper is so beautifully textured, and that, pardon me, that gives places for the pigments and the granulating portions to sort of settle in sometimes. So you get quite a different effect. Okay, so I think our buff titanium is nice and juicy and ready to go. See, I've got quite a bit on my brush. It is such a lovely soft color, semi-opaque, so it's not as transparent as others in the palette, but yeah, I think it's this might be one where you would want to use another color, for example, and maybe a bit of the granulation medium. And I think because there's quite a bit on there, the first thing I'm going to do, pardon, got that wet. The first thing I'm going to do is just dip back in to my raw Umber Violet and give enough pigment on this lower portion of this rock. And we'll add a bit more up here just for some little bit of texture. Now we've got a lot of that on there. Now I'm going to go in with just a wet brush, not dripping wet. I've given it a good swirl to clean it off and just taken the drips off. And I'm going to encourage the moisture up into that wet pigment that I have added with the raw Umber Violet. We're going to see how that works. And it's interesting, the buff titanium is moving up into the raw Umber Violet, even though my page is slightly tilted. So that is quite interesting to me how that is flowing. It's wicking right up into there. So, and I thought the opposite. I thought that the raw Umber Violet was going to come down into the rock beneath. And I think we'll go back in again with some more of the raw Umber Violet on just a damp brush and see if we can't get some of that to flow down. I might have to add some granulating medium there. Let's do that. Let's do that. We have a little bit left in here. Oh, there was more there than I thought. All right, let's get that moving around a little bit. We may have to go back in and define the bottom of that raw umber rock, but that's okay. Oops. We are a bit loose there. I do want that, yes, I want that raw Umber Violet to sort of come down a little bit. Make this pointed. And maybe we'll just give it a bit of encouragement. I was hoping more of it would come on this side of the rock where the shadows are supposed to be. So while we've got that happening, why don't we go back in with, pardon my reach, just going to dampen these a tiny bit rather than wet my brush. I think we'll go back in with let's go in with the Sodalite. It seems to be the color that I'm wanting to use for my shadows and my shading. So the buff titanium, I think, would be something that, for the most part, I would mix with other colors. And then we'll give this a little dark shadow area. And then, as with the others, we'll just, there's a lot of that fluid on there. I didn't realize there was quite that much in my pipette. But I do love how these pigments are traveling. And I mean, with rocks, you can make random shapes and have all kinds of beautiful things happening. Okay. Now I want to go back to what we did here with the granulating medium, with the Valentine Purple and the Sodalite that we added to it. it's quite dense. I think the Valentine Purple is quite an opaque color as well. So I'm just going to work on lifting a tiny bit of that out. So just a thirsty brush, damp brush, start slow. If you add too much moisture, it can get away on you. And we'll just work out a little bit of color just for a few little highlights. I love that all of these so far are lifting nicely, so you can always go back in and fine-tune a few things. I think my favorite so far is the Sodalite Genuine, the way it just filled that little rock area. And then the Tundra Violet is actually kind of pretty too. But we'll continue on. I want to try, this is going to be a very unusual stack of rocks. Ridiculously unusual, as Lorenz has told me some things are. And let's try, I want to try my Quinacridone Gold, I think, which typically is a bit granulating. It's one of the pigments that when you put it on top of another pigment, it pushes things around. So it's got some heavy pigmentation, I think, in it to cause that to happen. I may be wrong, but I think that's how that works. Now, I love here where I've actually touched the rock up above, and that Sodalite Genuine is just coming down, and that's one of the things that the granulating pigments will do, and they just sort of find their own way, and they make speckles and they make lines. So they're absolutely fabulous for making tree roots. I think soon we'll do a vignette, and I'll use that for the tree roots and the piece of the vignette that sort of flows down and off the page or into nothing on the page. Also, there's not any water in that little spot there, so the granulation and the wetness has sort of gone around that, rather because there's no water to follow, right? The pigment and the granulation fluid will flow into what's moist and what's already there. So there's a bit of this shading happening underneath from how that was coming together. And so we're going to try the Quinacridone Gold. I don't know where I'd be without my Quinacridone Gold. It is absolutely one of my favorites, as you know. And I'm also going to mention today I'm using a new board that I got from Watercolor online. It's actually made to attach to an easel, or not an easel, but a tripod that I use sometimes when I'm out and about for demonstration purposes. And I ordered it by mistake. I just wanted one that was flat. This one actually has the attachment on the back of it. So as it sits on my table, it's sitting up about, quarter of an inch, half an inch. So my page today is on a bit of a tilt, which is unusual for me. I'm typically just a very flat surface painter. So that's kind of helping with the flow of the granulation, and then the pigments happening here. So that's, and the Quinacridone Gold, I mean, if you put it on thick, you get this incredible orange color. And as you let it diffuse and add more water, you can lighten it up considerably. But it does on its own this very magical burst of pigment and of color that I have appreciated, I think, since the moment I started using Daniel Smith paints. And probably one of the big reasons that I don't change brands. I'm so happy, and it makes me joyful. And I was just saying to Lorenz this morning, I paint for the joy of it, and so if a color can bring you that joy, then it's something I'm going to stick with. Now, I did touch the other rocks up above, so you can see how granulating and how active this quinacridone gold is. It's found its way all the way up through the rock above it, and it's also going into the third rock above that. So any bit of moisture, this pigment combination is going to just find a place, find a home. It just moves and it settles in, and it's absolutely gorgeous. I love what it's done to that rock there. And I'm thinking I should have actually added a bit of that into this rock here just for some continuity and some brightness. We'll see what happens if we do that. Oh, now I've dabbed out. That's incredible lifting on that. All right. Yeah, I just love how if you allow your pigments and your water to do what they want to do without being without interfering a lot, and just see what happens. And sometimes that that to me makes the whole difference. It brings inspiration. Sometimes my paintings I'll start off with maybe a bit of an idea in mind, and then the pigments will take it off in another direction altogether. They kind of know, I think my pigments know me. They know that I'm all about the landscapes and the natural things. So it's just joyful to be able to have pigments and products that will allow that to happen. And like I say, give it some time. Look around at what you've got in your paint box, in your palette. If you think you're going to explore the granulating aspect of things, pick yourself up a bottle of the Winsor Newton, pardon me, granulation medium. Goes forever. I don't know what is in this. It looks just like water. I can't even imagine what properties allow it to do what it does. But it's like magic in a little bottle. And I'm going back with the Sodalite Genuine and just encouraging a tiny bit of, I want to see what happens here if I put the Sodalite Genuine on and tip it up to see if it actually will flow down into the quinacridone gold, or if that quinacridone gold is going to be so strong that it's not going to allow that to happen. I might just add a bit more water. The other thing I would like to try, because I have in my palette my Mayan Dark Blue and my Undersea Green. Those are my go-tos, and Moonglow. And I did some research, and people have been telling me for a long time that Moonglow is a fugitive color. But last night I went onto the Daniel Smith website and looked it up, and it's a #1 light fast, so it's very exceptionally light fast. So I don't think it's considered fugitive any longer. You can use it with confidence, I think, to enhance your paintings when you need to. So this is an interesting concept here. So I'm going to try the Mayan Dark Blue underneath this little guy here, because I want to see if that will move down. The quinacridone gold is still fairly wet. And I'm just going to go in with a wet brush and just touch some of these, touch this blue edge a tiny bit and see how much of that will actually flow down into the quinacridone gold. Some of it will go up into the... So I kind of like that. The Mayan Dark Blue sort of dissipates a little bit differently. Maybe not as pigmented as the Sodalite, but it does give that lovely sort of subtle display of color coming down into that other surface. I think that's quite gorgeous. All right. So we've got the quinacridone gold is still, it's actually drying on this. I'm just going to add just a bit of water to the bottom, and I'm going to go in to the Moonglow. Again, very thick paint. I'm not I'm not wanting to add more water to the surface. I just want pigment. And I'm just going to make the tip of my brush a little bit pointed, and add a bit of the Moonglow into the wetness. I don't think it's quite wet enough, but it is starting to move a tiny bit, so that's lovely. And some nice rich pigment into this area where it is quite wet. Now, typically, if I was making this as a finished painting that I wanted to finish, I probably wouldn't do the Mayan Dark Blue and the Moonglow on the same rock, but we're just exploring and seeing where the pigments will take us. And honestly, that Mayan Dark Blue has done something completely magical to the top of that rock with the Quinacridone Gold in it. The other thing that I will do, because we're just on this rock, and maybe it's a rare gem, rare stone, I just wanted to see what our Undersea Green, because that's another one of my favorites, to see how it's going to work with the Quinacridone Gold, and I do love that. So the Undersea Green is moving along really nicely. The Moonglow works well. The Quinacridone Gold, the Mayan Dark Blue. And I'm just going to add a bit of Mayan Dark Blue again on this corner. You know, it just really is one of my favorite colors. I had a participant the other day wanting to paint in brighter colors, and I was mentioning to Lorenz that I tried it, and I just didn't find the same joy in the pigments that I was using. They're not my colors, and it makes a difference, I think, when you're painting. If you found the colors that speak to you, that resonate with your sense of joy and your vision, then I think, you know, once you've found that, your painting becomes very satisfying, very joyful. You know, when I sit down to paint on my own, it's just such a peaceful and joyful process, and the outcome isn't usually something that I'm too concerned about. It's often something I'm very surprised at. And again, I just attribute it to the beautiful pigments and the water and the paper, and allowing those things to do what they need to do. So I think in a perfect world, I think this rock here is not my favorite shape, but that's all right. We'll continue on. Last but not least, I'm going to do a big wash on this bottom one, and gosh, I'm tempted to try something that I don't normally use, like a phthalo green and a phthalo blue. Let's do that. Let's do that, just, you know, because we can step out of our comfort zones, and it's not always as horrifying as it might feel sometimes. I'm going to wet them all because I don't know what the colors are here. And I'm going to put this guy away for now. And oh my goodness. Well, we have an unplanned adventure happening in the corner of this rock. Which is fine. I love that. I haven't given a lot of thought to what I would use in the background of this painting if it in fact still, you know, becomes a painting. So that's interesting, and I'm guessing that that was a bit of Sodalite that I had on that brush that added that gray in there. So I'm going to use a bigger brush because it's a bigger surface, and I'm going into my Phthalo Blue Green shade. And Phthalo Blue Green shade. It's you know, I used this when I was in Mexico and I painted some Caribbean scenes, and it was good. I didn't use it pure. I mixed it with some of my other colors just to tone it down. Again, it's not a color that I'm used to using a lot, but it's a color that appeals to a lot of people. So you can see it's granulating, it's moving, it's following the moisture on the page. And we'll just finish this corner off. I didn't mean to start quite so dark on this one side, but we can lighten that up. And this brush is full of water, and I just want to fill that space. Now, one thing that I also really enjoy doing is with a damp paper towel, and generally I keep a paper towel in my left hand because I'm right-handed, and I just will give it the lightest mist and sort of scrunch it up a little bit. I don't want it to be angular when I fold it up. I want it to be soft and gentle, because when I start to tap out color, I just want to touch the very surface. I don't want to be pushing on my paper. I'm just letting the surface of the paper towel just lightly touch. Now this will be something that I probably will want to add some granulation fluid to, but we'll see. So this is another phthalo color. It's Phthalo Green Blue shade. So they are quite similar. I see there's a little hair there, but you can see where they do tend to spread out a little bit. I think what I might want to try with this is a little bit more of the granulating medium. We'll see if that what that does to it. And it is moving it around quite nicely, quite interestingly. Now, I am concerned about this because I put so much pigment there, and it's, as I said in the beginning, I thought maybe my light would be coming from this corner. So I'm just going to pull as much as I can away from there. And I think I'm ready to touch this now up to the Quinacridone Gold. Let's see what happens when we do that. Just with a wet brush, encouraging that pigment to move up and touch that gold. Not much happening there. The gold is dry enough that it's actually settled in. Beautiful granulation. You can see the texture and everything happening there. The quinacridone, or not the quinacridone, the phthalo blues and greens here are not entirely still. They're moving a little tiny bit, but I don't see that they're really moving a lot. So, as my last trick effort on this one, I'm going to just touch a bit of the Quinacridone Gold in myself. And see where that goes. Maybe that will will encourage things a little bit more. I'm going to add a bit heavier pigment there and see if it will run. The surface is damp, but not dripping. But I do like that that's moving along there a little bit. Tip it up just slightly. Yeah, I do like that. I like how that's happened. And because I just want some darker shadows, I don't use the phthalo much, so I wasn't really sure how deep that was going to work. So I'm just going to go in on this dark side and put in some of that Mayan Dark Blue. You could use Payne's Gray. That would work as well. And then again, just perhaps a touch under the surface of the other rock. Tip it up. Let the colors play. The Mayan Blue is really, really quite lovely. The way it works with other paints, with other pigments. And there we have a stack of granulating rocks. I think you know, this probably isn't very rock-like on the bottom, but I love how the colors and the textures and things have all come together and sort of pushed each other around, and we can adjust those. We can move them around a little bit. Take a little highlight off some of the corners. Yes, I'm really pleased with the granulation of all of the paints I tried today. I hope you'll give them a try as well. The granulation fluid is, actually Granulation Medium is called, by Winsor Newton. So this is what we learned today. We learned that different paints granulate differently. Color combinations that you may not have thought of can really work well together. And if your pigments aren't granulating and giving you the texture that you want, you can add some granulation medium and play with that. Switch it up a little bit. Change brushes. Do some lifting. Add more water. Add granulation medium. See where you take it. It's I think it's just a really amazing process. Watch what your paints will do for you. I'd like to thank the Process Art Discovery audience for joining me today. We had a little bit of fun exploring a quick way to fill a bit of time over the festive season. I hope you take some time to yourself and enjoy a little bit of what brings you joy. And if you like what you've seen, please subscribe to the channel or head on over to the members area.